Hello everyone, I'm Golpo Dadu and today I'll tell you a story, The Duplicity of Hargraves by the American author O. Henry. The story is set in the early 1900s. Major Pendleton Talbot and his daughter Miss Lydia Talbot had come to reside at a boarding house in Washington DC from a small town in the American Deep South. Major Talbot is adding the finishing chapters to his book of reminiscences. Major Talbot is old South. His mind lives before the Civil War, when the Talbots owned thousands of acres of fine cotton land and slaves to till them. The family mansion was the scene of princely hospitality to the aristocracy of the South. The 68-year-old Major wears queer clothes of antique coats, plaited shirts and string ties, and carries with him old pride, honor and politeness. Miss Lydia is a plain little plump old maid of 35 who ran the household with thrifty common sense, unlike the Major, who considers bills a nuisance to be settled once his book is published. Most of the boarders were away at work during the day, other than Henry Hopkins Hargraves, who worked evenings at a popular vaudeville show. Vaudeville is a light, often comic theatrical piece, frequently combining pantomime, dialogue, dancing and song. This young man took a great fancy to the Major, and soon they became as if old friends. The Major would read out from his manuscript each afternoon, and Hargraves would listen with rapt attention, laughing at all the right points. Soon the Talbots' funds ran out, and the Major's book had been rejected by his publisher. Miss Lydia wired to an uncle to no avail. With their last few dollars, the Major splurged on 2 theatre tickets to a play called A Magnolia Flower, a war drama that had portrayed the South in good light, he had heard. So off they went. They looked at their programs and found that a Colonel Webster Calhoun was played by their neighbor, Henry H. Hargraves. Soon the curtain went up, revealing a typical southern plantation scene. Hargraves appeared in the second act. The Major and the daughter sat stunned. The young man had caricatured the Major exactly. His strange clothes, his idiosyncrasies of speech, accent, intonation, and his pompous courtliness, all exaggerated for dramatic effect. The audience was in raptures. There were rounds and rounds of applauses. The Major, livid with anger, wanted to leave, but was held back by his daughter, who knew that his early departure would only attract everyone's attention to him and bring down the house. Next day, Hargraves stopped by the Major's door in the afternoon with the press reviews of his play from the previous night. But the Major was in no mood for friendly small talk. He told Hargraves in no uncertain terms that he had seen the play for himself last night and was deeply insulted. Hargraves was surprised and most contrite. He remonstrated that he had no intention to offend the old man. He also knew of his strained financial circumstances and was willing to extend a loan of a couple of $100 or more to tide him over. But the Major would have none of it and threw Hargraves out. The young man left the boarding house as well and took up residence in the vicinity of his theatre, where A Magnolia Flower was running to full houses. Major Talbot's finances grew critical. No help was forthcoming from Uncle Ralph. Suddenly, deliverance came from an entirely unexpected quarter. One afternoon, the doormaid announced an old colored man who had come to see the Major. He was decently dressed in a woolen suit and limped heavily in one foot. "I be bound, you don't know me, Mars Pendleton," said the man. He was called Cindy's Mose, he said, and he had migrated to Nebraska immediately after the war. And the Major's father had given him a pair of mules to start him off in his new place. In Nebraska, he had sold the mules for $300 and invested it in a smithy. He did well in business, raised a fine family. The new railroad came close to his town, and he was now well settled. He was now in Washington as a delegate to a Baptist convention in the city. He had heard that the Major lived there. Then he reached into his pocket. What I came for, besides the sight of home folks, was to pay Mars Pendleton what I owes him. He took out $300. The Major's father had given him the mules, saying he could repay him whenever he could. He was only repaying an old debt, now that he could well afford to. The Major and Miss Lydia had tears in their eyes as he accepted the money from Uncle Mose. A few weeks later, a letter arrived from Miss Lydia from New York. It was from Hargraves. He was fortunate, he wrote, to be playing Colonel Calhoun in a magnolia flower at $200 a week. He was very sorry, he said, for the hurt he had caused to the Major, and wished him well. There was a postscript below. How did I play Uncle Mose? That's a typical O. Henry ending. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel before you go. Bye for now.